contra a los indios en nuestra contra durante generaciones.
¿Por qué no os unís a los franciscanos y salváis sus almas? Si es que las tienen. Si se entromete, restadle.
A ver. Los evangelistas. Mateo, Marcos, Lucas, Juan. Padre, ¿podéis ayudarme? Creo que he olvidado los nombres.
César.
Carlos.
Manolo. Paco.
Federico.
Rodrigo. Felipe.
A ver, ¿quién hará de Jesucristo?
Te bautizaré y obtendrás la gloria y la paz en el cielo, de lo contrario sufrirás un tormento eterno en el infierno. En el nombre de Cristo todavía puedes salvar tu alma. Aprender la diferencia entre el cielo y el infierno. Pedirle perdón al Señor. Yo te bautizaré y obtendrás la gloria y la paz eterna en el cielo. De lo contrario sufrirás un tormento eterno en el infierno. ¿Me ha entendido bien?
¿Quichu cristianos se loman?
¿Van los cristianos al cielo?
Los buenos cristianos, sí.
Cachaguaychis infierno, man.
Mándame al infierno.
¡Silencio! Esto es lo que os ocurrirá si desafiáis a los cristianos.
Technico 15, Chantapi Shailini, Abulki Certa, Agudos Cargai Certa. Technico 15, Chantapi Shailini Certa, Agudos Cargai Certa. Chantapi Shailini, Abulki Certa, Agudos.
¿Qué dicen?
Oh desprecio a vuestro Dios, desprecio vuestra codicia.
Agudos Cargai Certa.
¿Qué están diciendo, padre? ¡Su nombre! ¡Que no pisemos nunca! ¡Será olvidado!
Three indigenous Taino people that Columbus and the Spanish encountered that your children should know about instead of him. Number 3, Anacawana. Anacawana, whose name translates to golden flower, was one of 5 chiefs or caciques and the only woman to be one on the island of Quisquia, aka Hispaniola, or the Dominican Republic in Haiti. She was known as a poet, songstress, and expert negotiator. She was actually able to hold off the Spanish for a few years after negotiating the peace treaty. However, she was betrayed after inviting them to a feast and she was executed. Number 2, Cayo Canabo. Cayo Canabo was a chief or cacique as well and was actually married to Anacawana. He was known as a ferocious and fearless fighter, and he never trusted the Spanish at all. In fact, he planned an attack on the northern part of the island where they had an encampment. Unfortunately, he was defeated and sold into slavery, and he died on the way to Spain. And number 1 is Hatui. Hatui was another fearless warrior and cacique. After fighting off the Spanish for 10 years, he rounded up about 400 of his men and sailed to Cuba by canoe to warn them of the coming invasion. He also used that as an opportunity to train and recruit troops. After being captured and put on a stake, he was asked if he wanted to be saved so he could become a Christian and go to heaven. He said if all the Spanish were going to heaven, he would much rather go to hell. And because of his persistent resistance, he's known as Cuba's first national hero.
This is Genesis 41 and 51. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God said he hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. Kahala Yahweh Bashem El Shai, Ba'Shem Kodash, which are the true Hebrew names of the Most High Father, Yahweh, which is Hebrew for He is, and His only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai, which is Hebrew for He is salvation. Double honors my teachers, the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect, who are the house of David reborn again in this generation. And Shalom to the 130 Yasharallah, who today were known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who before losing our true heritage, we were known as, and still are, the true Hebrew Israelites of the Holy Bible. In today's lesson, we're going to go into the tribe of Manasseh, who is today known as the so-called Cubans. Now, Manasseh, or Cubans, like you've seen in that video that we first watched, they were part of the indigenous group, which the Europeans referred to them as the Taínos. Okay, just kind of like in the second video where that guy, he gave 3 heroes of the Taíno people. These were all the individual 10 tribes that came over here to America, but they didn't refer to themselves as the Taíno or indigenous or none of that stuff. They went by their own names. Okay, the names that they went by in this example here, which is from the book called Lost Tribes and the Promised Lands by Ronald Sanders, it basically covers a testimony of what happened when this guy, he's like a missionary, he went back to the Americas, and he was basically there, I think in like the Florida area. Well, eventually he was looking for the native Indians because he had remembered that they had similar histories to that of the people of the Bible, and he went back to find them to get more details, and he had a translator with him. Well, the translator that he had with him knew where these native Indians were at, and well, this is their interaction that is from this book, right? Which is, again, this is from like the 1600s. There are collections from the friars and of the Catholic Church that came over here that recorded this stuff. It says, upon hearing her words, they rose and went over to Montesinos. So her is the translator, and Montesinos is this like Spanish like friar or missionary guy who's trying to prove that these people are the native Indian or the Israelites. It says, they went over to Montesinos, and to his utter astonishment said, Shammai, Yasharel, Yahweh, Nawa, Yahweh Achad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. They had recited in Hebrew the fundamental credo of Judaism. A brief conversation then ensued in their common ancestral tongue, according to Montesinos, whose fluency in it is almost as perplexing to the reader of his narrative as is that of his 3 mysterious new companions. Those 3 mysterious companions are basically the natives that came over to him to come talk to him. It says, they told him that they were themselves of the tribe of Reuben, and that the tribe of Joseph lived on an island nearby. Okay, so you see, this here is proof that the 10 tribes of Israel, right, 10 of the 12 tribes, the northern kingdom, the so-called Latinos and Native Americans, came to the Americas when they left the Eastern Hemisphere. Okay, when they disappeared, let's get the timeline. Here we go. Because you see, what happened when you get into the Bible, the northern kingdom, the Latinos and Native Americans, we had basically sinned against God so much that he finally decided in the 722 BC to kick us out of the land. Now, the crazy thing is this is a total side note, but remember that video in the very beginning, or should I say the second video, when he talked about Anaconda, or her name, something similar like that, how she was a negotiator and she held off the Spanish for a couple for a while, but then they killed her. Well, and she just happened to be a Dominican. Well, check this out. From Judith, who was from the tribe of Simeon, who would be the tribe of, the Dominicans today. She just so happens to be from the same tribe, that being the tribe of Simeon. Okay, because the Simeonites today are known as the Dominican Republicans. All right, and that's who Judith was. So she did the same thing back in the old time. So I bet you that was probably her in the reincarnation, right? But things don't always play out the same, but they have similar echoes, right? So that being said, back to the main point. Us Northern Kingdom Israelites, the Latinos and Native Americans, we eventually sinned too much, and the Lord eventually kicked us out of the land. Right? He brought the Assyrians up against us, and they took us out of our land, and they brought in foreigners, basically Persians, into that land to live in it and basically take up our place. It's that way we could never come back. Well, we went into captivity for 100 years, okay? And eventually what ended up happening, Nineveh fell. Basically, the Babylonians came and conquered the Assyrians, all right? And causing, that's where Nineveh fell and all that stuff took place. This happened in 612 BC. Now, that eventually basically freed, or de facto freed the Northern Kingdom, which by this time, close to 100 years of captivity, there's people like Tobit's family, for example, they weren't slaves, but they were kind of like the lower class of the society, right? Kind of how we are today here in the Western society, right? In America, the Negro, Latino, Native Americans, we're the lowest classes here, right? And that's because we're the indentured slaves that run the system. Same thing, how the Israelites, the Northern Kingdom Israelites, were in the kingdom of Assyria. Well, here, when Nineveh fell, Assyria fell to the Babylonians, us Israelites, we basically became free. And a lot of us, because we didn't want to go back because our land was occupied, some of us went back, but the majority of us, as you read in 2nd Ezra 13 and 40, which we'll get into in just a bit, tells you that we left the Eastern Hemisphere, and that was it. And it gave a vague explanation of where we went, but I'll break it down in a bit, explaining how it's over here to the Americas. But this here is what I wanted to show you, is that what this man was trying to prove. See, because all of ancient history understood that there was a group of people who had gone missing, that being the 10 lost tribes of Israel, right? Or as they would say, right, the lost tribes of Israel. They knew, that was us. But the thing is in modern history or modern society, they try to drown this information out. They don't want you to know about this. This is why they don't highlight these narratives anymore, just like they used to back in the old days, where people actually would learn these things. Well, right here is proof that the native Indians here, the Taínos, right, the group, or that's what the Europeans called them, right, that they themselves were calling themselves by their tribal names. And in this case here, the tribe of Joseph, which basically is the Puerto Ricans and the Cubans, right? When you get into their, the Cubans today, this is their island, okay? This is where the tribe of Manasseh is at. And that testimony, I think, happened here in Florida, where the tribe of Reuben, the Seminole Indians, are at, right? But this is the island that they were talking about, right? This island, and over here, Puerto Rico, which is the tribe of Ephraim, right? So you got Manasseh and Ephraim over here. So again, when you get into where Manasseh and Ephraim come from, well, they were the sons of Joseph. Joseph was the son of Jacob, right? Who he had through his loved wife, Rachel. And Joseph was Jacob's favorite. And, you read all about this in Genesis, and towards the end, beautiful story, right? But again, we're talking about, in this case, where Manasseh came from. So he was Joseph's firstborn son, okay? And the Bible, eventually gets into how Manasseh and his brother Ephraim were blessed, and they basically took the blessing of their father upon them, right? And this happened around the same time when Jacob blessed his other 11 children, including he also blessed Joseph again. Right, here's Joseph in his Egyptian garb. This is let's get that. This here is when Jacob, knowing that he was going to pass, blessed the children of Joseph privately. This is Genesis 48 and 13. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand towards Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him. See, because Joseph, knowing, about, the right hand, left hand narrative, he wanted to make sure that Manasseh was in front of his father's, right hand, because he was his firstborn. Verse 14. And Israel stretched out his right hand, and laid it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God fed me all my life long unto this day. The angel which redeemed me from all evil bless the lads, and let my name be named in them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head onto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. And he blessed them that day, saying, In thee shall Israel bless, saying, God make thee as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. So that right there is the blessing that was given to both of the children. Okay, so it tells you here that Manasseh would eventually become a great people, right? Not as great as his brothers, but or as big as Ephraim or the Puerto Ricans are going to get, but that he would be a great people too. And when you look into the Cuban people, they have a deep, rich heritage, even till today, that they've stuck with, with this whole communist stuff going on over there. But when you look at them and stuff, like there's a lot of culture that comes out of the Cuban, right? Just look at their music scene, look at their lifestyle that they push. Now let's go and read this. This here is when Jacob started to bless the other his sons, and he also included Joseph, which again, Joseph, his blessing ultimately goes on to both tribes, that being the tribe of Ephraim, the Puerto Ricans, and the tribe of Manasseh, the Cubans. This is Genesis 49 and 22. Joseph is a fruitful bow, even a fruitful bow by a well, whose branches run over the wall. The archers have sorely grieved him, and shot at him, and hated him. This is ultimately talking about how these two tribes are going to be brought low, and we know what happened. Things, for example, like in the video that I showed at the beginning of this lesson. Verse 24. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. For even by the God of thy father, who shall help thee, and by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heavens above blessings of the deep that layeth under, blessings of the breast and of the womb. The blessings of thy fathers have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren. So there you go. So ultimately, this shows you how these two tribes are going to get blessed very, heavily. And when you look at the Puerto Ricans and you look at the Cubans, they have been blessed, right? Look at where they have their own islands, right? They've secured leadership, within our nation, right? The tribe of Ephraim is considered the head nation of all the northern kingdom, right? And when you look at Manasseh, his map, for example, is his portion in Israel is double. You got West Manasseh and East Manasseh, right? So this just shows you how blessed Manasseh has become. Just like when you look at the map between the Cuba and Puerto Rico. With that being said, let's go and read this, because this here is the additional blessing which was given to the tribe of Manasseh and Ephraim, but it was given by Moses when Moses was about to depart towards the end of Deuteronomy. This is Deuteronomy 33 and 13. And of Joseph he said, "Blessed of Yahweh be his land, for the precious things of heaven, for the dew and for the deep that couches beneath, and for the precious fruits brought forth by the sun, and for the precious things put forth by the moon, and for the chief things of the ancient mountains, and for the precious things of the lasting hills, and for the precious things of the earth and fullness thereof, and for the good will of him that dwelt in the bush. Let the blessing come upon the head of Joseph, upon the top of the head of him that was separated from his brethren. His glory is like the firstlings of his bullock, and his horns are like the horns of the unicorns, which with them he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth. And they are the 10,000 of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh." So in this case here, it would explain how basically the children of Joseph, namely Ephraim, right, the head, would ultimately lead the northern kingdom over here to the Americas, right, to the other ends of the earth, right? And that's what they ultimately did, right? They were the ones that led the other kingdoms, back to it, because remember, Israel always had elders. So that right there is what I was talking about earlier, about how when you get into the biblical history of the Native American Indians and the indigenous natives of the South Americas, you find out that all their historic folklore all echo the story of the biblical Israelites that fled, namely the part of the Bible which was taken out on purpose by these devils who are trying to hide the truth of what the Bible is actually talking about, how it's a heritage and not a belief system. Right? Let's get it. This right here explains how the northern kingdom got taken down by the Assyrians, kind of like I explained to you, and then later how we came over here to the Americas on ships. Okay, let's read it. This is 2nd Ezra 13 and 40. "Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hoshea the king, whom Salmanasar the king of Assyria led away captive. And he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took this counsel amongst themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. Now, I'm going to stop it right there real quick because, again, when you get into, this is during about 600 BC, okay? And when you get into 600 BC, this is about 300 years before the Greeks came into play, right? The Greeks were around about 300 BC, right? The Neolithic, or the Neo-Greeks, I should say, okay? And the which were basically the Edomites that had taken over. Well, back then, one of the oldest maps that we have that, modern, science, vouches for, is the Herodotus world map, okay? And the Herodotus world map is from 430 BC, basically about 200 years after the time that the events of 2nd Ezra's 13 and 40 take place, right? When the Native American Indians and the Latinos came over here to the Americas, right? Because again, we, for the most part, were up here in Israel, got taken to the Assyria, came down the Euphrates, and we're going to read it. We came around this bottom of the sea and we just took off. But the point being, I said all that to say this, is that this 200 years later is what is the known world, okay? Nobody else knew anything else other than what was right here. That being said, let's continue back on 42, right? Because this is where it says they wanted to go into a further country where never mankind dwelt. So I said that because a lot of Protestant Christians try to claim that the 10 tribes went, north into Europe and became Britain and all that stuff, which that's not how that happened. Okay? Let's continue. 42. That they might there keep their statutes which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. That's up in this area here, coming down right on into the, I think this is the Arabian Sea. It says, 44, for the Most High then showed signs for them, and held still the flood, till they were passed over, for through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Azareth. And when you get into Azareth, that just basically means unknown land, but basically it's the Americas, okay? That's where this blue line represents where the northern kingdom went when they left the eastern hemisphere in 612 BC, the known world, okay? And what happened? Well, you Latinos, which include you Cubans, you fulfilled prophecy, okay? The prophecy that would befall the Israelites, who again in today's day are known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Indians, okay? This is why these three group of people, like it tells you right here, right? The true Israelites went into slavery and lost their heritage, right? The same thing happened to these three groups of people. They got conquered by people from the other sides of the world. They got put into captivity and they lost their heritage, right? The so-called Negroes, look at their names. They're Smiths, Johnsons, Jackson, right? All these different type of names. And same thing with Latinos. The Lopez, Hernandez, right? All these different names. Those are not the last names of the Latinos, right? Of the Northern Kingdom Israelites. That's the names of your captors, okay? That came from the Europe. Native Indians, like there's images here showing how a lot of them are got the names of their captives, but again, a lot of them lost their heritage and are now called things like bear paw or shadow fox or different names like that, right? But the point being is that we all lost our heritage, and we all went into captivity, and we're still in captivity till this day, because this is biblical prophecy that the Israelites, for us sinning against our power, our God, Yahweh, right? We ultimately had to go into captivity. We had to pay for breaking our covenant with the Lord. But this is why you find relics like this, right? The Aztec calendar talks about, the story of the Bible and the future salvation. The first Negro Baptist church, right? Slaves wrote in Hebrew on the pews, right? Right here, the Native Indians. This is what they draw Quetzalcoatl looking like. Not a fucking flying snake with feathers. No, it was a so-called Negro that had garments on, right? And then besides that, you got things like the Decalogue stone, which is found in, this is the Las Lunas stone, right? That has the Ten Commandments written in Paleo Hebrew, right? This is Yahweh, right? It's right there, right? It's multiple places on this rock, right? So that's the point, right? It's right here. So the point being is that, this is you Cubans' true history. This is where you go back to, right? Your history doesn't start with the Taínos, right? The Taínos come from the tribe of the northern kingdom of Israel, okay? That would be the Latinos and Native American Indians. But I said all that to say this, is that you Cubans, you are the biblical tribe of Manasseh, which is one of the 12 tribes of Israel, which makes you a biblical Israelite of the tribe of Manasseh. So that's your heritage, and that again is prophecy. This is Hosea 1:10. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, Ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, Ye are the sons of the living God. Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai. So, hopefully this video was edifying. Until next time, give all honor, glory, and praises to Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai, B'Hashem Ruach Kodash. Shalom.